My name is Arana. I hate to come out somewhere and give you a dry lecture which puts you to sleep, and also I have a problem staying awake myself. So basically I tell it in a kind of story form as to how I got involved with the whole situation and where I am today, and in between what has happened. Quite a bit has happened because I'm not as young as I look. I'm 63. One foot is in the grave, the other's in a banana skin. I have a very serious medical problem. Like when Anthony asked me when is the book going to be over, I said hopefully before I pass away in the next year. Initially when I had my open heart surgery and I had a heart attack after the surgery and everything else in 1998, I scheduled myself for about 2 years before I pass away. And then I found I went into the third year and I was not dying, and into the fourth year and I was not dying, and into the fifth year, and then I said I give up. Okay, when he decides to take me away from this world of pain which I get up with every morning, I will in the meantime keep doing something and keep active. One of the ways I keep active is every Saturday morning I teach yoga through the oral tradition to students in the Queen's libraries, and that has been going on pretty well. And we recently had an international conference on Ayurveda, which is India's medicinal system, and on yoga and the antecedents of yoga, and it went off reasonably well. Most of my students are Chinese, and I appreciate the Chinese because they are very health conscious, and any form of exercise, even if you tell them 4 in the morning, they'll get up and they'll trudge out there to the park. During the summer we have classes in the botanical gardens in Queens because it is closer to nature, and that is where I believe yoga comes from. In the winter months we go and sulk inside the libraries and we practice there because it is warmer inside the libraries. So that's where we are at. Now when I was very young, and that's a long way back, I was brought up very funnily speaking English in India. We spoke English at home, we learnt in English, I taught in English. And the only way I learned Tamil, which is the mother tongue of the state from where I come, is because we spoke to the servants in Tamil. But then when I came to the US, this is the funny part of it, I made a lot of money from Tamil because I worked in the courts as an interpreter. And I was making good money, and I wrote to my father saying, hey, I'm living now on Tamil, which we used to speak to our servants at home. So it's very funny, and the English is not paying me very well. From high school, I was brought up a Catholic. And so Daddy was the old-fashioned type, and so every Saturday it was to confession. And then Sunday was communion, and, there was only one God, and it was the true Christian God, blah, blah, blah. And then from there I went into high school, and from high school I went into the army. Now once I got into the army, then religion went into the background. Then there was no Daddy pushing us on Saturdays and Sundays. But on Sundays we used to ask for an outpass to go out, and I and another Sikh cadet, the Sardajis, the Sikhs, we used to go out to eat masala dosas on the guys that we were going to church. And that's the only way you could get out. You just can't, take your bike and get out except during cadet days. So 4 years of training, 5 years of service, and religion really went into the background. Then I came out and I became an investigator in Madras, in Chennai, where I will show you closer and closer as we go where we are at. And in Madras I opened my own investigation and security agency, so further away from religion but closer towards the martial arts. Now, unbeknown to most people, India has a martial arts system. It is called Kalari Payat. And like most martial arts systems, it says it is meant for defense. And the training is so hard that you really learn to defend yourself. But then what happens is, from Kalari Payat at that time, which I wanted to learn but didn't have the opportunity because out of about 1.2 billion people, there are only about 3,000 practitioners of the art form in India. Again, I will show you where it is on the map. But then what happened was there was a big noise suddenly because Bruce Lee came out. And then the other movie, 36 Chambers of Shaolin, so everybody wanted to be the next Bruce Lee, and nobody got ever involved in Kalarippai. I was one of them also. I went to classes in karate and I learned karate and I sweated like a dog. Thank God that time I was in physical condition, so I was able to deal with it. And we learned from karate, but during the study of karate, I also learned about an Indian Buddhist monk who they claimed was the father of the martial arts, called Bodhidharma. That was my first connection with Bodhidharma. But having been an investigator and journalist also, I said, and in journalism also teaches you 100 million times, check your facts. You cannot make any mistake, check your facts. And I said, if these guys are saying he's the father of the martial arts, and till recently the Chinese and the Japanese have been very protective of their own societies. So whatever martial arts they had came from them. But then to suddenly hear a wushu teacher in Dengfeng County near the Shaolin Temple in China telling me, no, it came from India. And I was like, what the heck happened here? This guy is acknowledging it came from India, there's something very wrong. And then Mas Oyama, the karate grandmaster, has even put it in writing in his books that it came from India. So I said, let's poke my nose into it and see what happened. And again I came back to Bodhidharma. And then finally, after years and years of off and on research, I found that Bodhidharma went from India to China in the 5th century AD. And he propagated Mahayana Buddhism, which later on slowly became a bifurcation of Mahayana Buddhism, leading to his own thoughts on how to attain enlightenment, which is very different from what the Buddha did. So I said, okay, let's study more. Again, the thing came back to mind, check your facts. So I started checking my facts and I found that this guy there was very little information available about him. And whatever information was there, many Westerners especially said he was a myth. Even Buddhist teachers, Buddhist nationalists of the American background said he was a myth. And I said, when he has been mentioned in historical records, how can he be a myth? So again, poked my nose when, thank God I had time for it, and started fiddling around. And I found that, frustrating as it is, I couldn't find one word about him from historical records in India. A lot of stories, but nothing I could base on fact. But then I found that he had gone to China, so I started liaising with the Chinese and the governments there. And initially this was good old days in the early 80s. They were not very excited about religion. So they kind of shoved me away. It exists, it doesn't exist, the books are not available, and drove me crazy. 1989 June, Tiananmen Square hit. 1989 August, I get a letter saying, you're welcome to come to Shaolin Temple and we will shut the temple down for you for half a day so that you can photograph it. So I said, this is either somebody has sneaked me a unauthentic letter, let me double check. So I called them and found that they had actually written the letter. And hats off to the tourist minister in the province of Henan, Henan, who really moved heaven and earth to make life for me as comfortable as possible. So I went there, they opened their libraries, they opened specific books, etc., helped me get the translations. Then they flew me to Zhengzhou, which is the capital of Henan province. From there, a 2-hour drive to Shaolin Temple, where this monk is very famous for. And then they literally shut down the temple for half a day and allowed me to photograph it. And then from there, what happened was one funny incident to show you how we are kind of far apart yet very close. In the morning at Shaolin Temple for breakfast, I got the typical kanji and rice and pork and all that. And I got beautiful parathas, which is an Indian bread. And I said, whoa. In Dengfeng County at that time population 89 was about 200 people who lived on the temple, cleaning the temple, helping, guiding tourists, etc. Now, of course, it's a booming business. The place has completely changed. And so I ate these parathas, and after breakfast, I told Jo I want to meet the chef here. And she said, for what? And I said, I want to thank him. He knows I'm Indian and he made me parathas. And she says, what are parathas? And I said, this bread here, it is the Chinese bread on the table. And she says, no, that's Chinese bread. That's not Indian bread, that's Chinese bread. The only difference is in the dough. The Chinese love their spring onions. They mince up spring onions and mix it with the dough. And then they fry it and cook it and do the same thing that we do it. And even here in Chinatown and in Flushing, you find they sell you 4 of these little parathas. When I couldn't get parathas, I used to go and buy them and then just warm them up. And since the oil is already in it, you don't need to add any oil. Just warm it up gently and you have a nice fresh paratha going. So it showed the closeness there, and in their medicinal systems I also found they use a lot of herbs and roots and all sorts of things that come from nature. And I said, this is very close to India. And then if you think about it, for centuries through the old Silk routes, there's always been trade. And there's always been a lot of exchange of information, which one side claimed came from us and the other side claimed came from them, and that bickering goes on. I have decided long ago that the Chinese still outbeat us by about 20 million people. We are 1.3 and they are 1.1 actually legally. They are about 1.3, so I don't want to pick a fight with 1.3 billion Chinese and start a war. So I've decided where it came from, how it came, I've decided to leave that alone. I just say there is this exchange of information, each side is using it in their own systems and they are helping each other. But coming back to Bodhidharma, there is a lot of evidence and a lot of contradictory evidence, but where India is concerned, the only thing we can come out with is there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. People are very casual, and it's the Indian way of dealing with things. And like when I asked a guy, you are giving me this fact about Bodhidharma that he was a Pallava, he belonged to the Pallava group. How do you base that on? Is there any historical record? And he got very upset with me, and I'm telling you in Tamil, he says, "Na sir, na thaan solringene neenga kekka maatringene." Meaning, what is this? I am telling you and you are not listening to me. So that is how historical facts get distorted. Historical facts get twarped and out of control. So I am using that in my book as circumstantial evidence. But direct evidence comes from the many records I was able to get copies of and translate from Chinese. And the Chinese are very noted for keeping very good records. I'll tell you, around the 7th century, there was a monk who sat down and chronicled using blackjack and papyrus about the history of 1,200 monks in Chinese Buddhism. And today, with computers and electric lights and a Coke on the table and a nice warm room, we are making mistakes. You can imagine in those days, in the 7th century, he used most probably a lamp, or during the daytime he wrote outside, and yet he was able to chronicle this. So their records are reasonably authentic. There are about 6 very good books which mention him either in large form or in small form. But again, coming back to Buddhism, when the monks take up their final vows, they usually renounce the past. They say, we have nothing more. Our life started from the time we took up Buddhism. So the only thing I could glean was from Chinese records was he was the 3rd son of a prince, which comes up again and again and again and again. Not 3rd son of a prince, 3rd son of a king. So he was obviously a prince. And it is said that in the year 500 or so, Prajnatara, who was the 27th patriarch in the hierarchy of Chan Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism from the Buddha, had come into that area where this king and his 3 sons lived. And he watched the 3 sons for some time, and then finally he chose Bodhidharma to be the one who will be the 28th patriarch. So in India, he's pretty senior. He's 28th patriarch in the lineage in Mahayana Buddhism from the Buddha. But believe me, nothing recorded in history. And there is a reason for it. They say the 3rd to the 6th century was a long night in Indian history because of the constant invasions from abroad, from the north, and the invasions that took place between the principalities and little kingdoms inside the south. A lot of historical records got destroyed. The only one where they can draw some sort of information is from the stupas. that King Ashoka built from north to south in India, and there you glean some sort of information. Otherwise, most of everything that I have learnt in Kalaripayat, which is India's martial arts system, yoga, comes from what you call is the oral tradition. That means I will teach you by telling you, and you will listen, and it either goes from master to student or from father to son, etc., etc. So very rarely is anything really recorded down. And coming back to Bodhidharma again, you find that according to most of what I can put together, he landed in Canton in 527 AD. And it drove me quite crazy because I looked for Canton thinking in my own stupid little way that it's a small place. So I took these maps and went with it with a magnifying glass. Where is Canton, Canton, Canton? Till one of my yoga students told me, no, Canton is a whole province. So I felt kind of stupid. But then I said, okay, now since this is the whole province, where did he land first?
Canton is Guangzhou.
Guangzhou, right. And then,
Guangdong is the province.
oh, I see. Now in Guangzhou, I just discovered this 3 months ago, after a lot of bickering here at the Chinese tourist office, and they are not very happy when they have to, I do not know why, when they have to part with information. There is a place actually in their tourist literature which says that the house in which he lived with in Guangzhou is actually still preserved there as his house. And then from there he went northward. He had a very famous interview with an emperor who had built many different Buddhist temples and done a lot of good work, and the emperor is supposed to have asked him, I did all this, what do I gain out of it? And Bodhidharma replied, no merit. So he got upset, and then in a roundabout way he made things difficult for Bodhidharma. So Bodhidharma went off from there, and he's supposed to have crossed the river on a reed, R-E-E-D. But my conclusion comes to is like, it's not really a reed, it may have been a boat shaped like a reed.
How did he land in Canton?
Yeah, in my opinion, I'll come to that. Buddhism traveled to China in two ways. One through the north, with over mules and horses and etc., etc. Buddhist scriptures went across and they were translated in China. And via the north, when it went there, there is in Luoyang, in China, in Henan province, there is a White Horse Temple. And that White Horse Temple is named White Horse Temple because the first Buddhist scriptures that came into that area were brought on 2 white horses. And the 2 white horses are actually buried in that temple in Luoyang. Then from there, a little north to that is the Shaolin Temple. The Shaolin Temple was built by another emperor for an Indian monk called Batua. And it was built there because it was built to make things comfortable for him so that he could translate Sanskrit scriptures into Chinese. Then in the meantime, Bodhidharma landed there, and even the abbot at the temple didn't kind of get along with him because he had his own concept of Buddhism. So they took him up, so he went off into this cave about 3,000 feet above in Mount Shonshan, and he meditated there for 9 years. Now there are many stories regarding that. They say he meditated there and he became so numb due to the long hours of meditation that his lower body fell away. Then they say that to keep awake, he actually cut off his eyelids one day and threw it on the ground, and there tea plants grew up. So there are many fables, and to sit down and go through all that and say, okay, this happened in the 5th century, most probably they were trying to create a kind of myth about this guy. Because from the Shaolin Temple, I climbed this mountain. We started at 6 in the morning and went on till about 3 in the afternoon. I am now terribly out of shape. At that time, I was reasonably in shape. But the Chinese have a very dirty habit. They don't build their steps zigzag on a mountain to make it easy. They build it straight upwards. Each step is about 9 inches, all sloping downwards. And when you got a camera bag with 2 bodies and 3 lenses and all that, and you're climbing this, believe me, your tongue is between your knees. Yet, every day there was an old man in that village. Now you have soda bottles where you unscrew the cap and it fizzes. In India at that time, and in China also, there was this very thick glass bottles where they would fill it up with the drink and then pump it up with gas and then extract a marble which would come up and seal the top. So when you wanted to open it, you actually put your thumb in that and whacked the marble, and the marble went out, and then the gas fizzed, and then you drank the drink. This guy would carry about 50 of these bottles every day from ground level up to about 2/3 of the way up the mountain. If you looked at him, you would think that any minute he would fall on his face and die. He was that old. This guy was prehistoric. And when I carried these camera bags and when I reached this guy, I was dead. I was, in a way, believe it or not, I was ready to give up. And then he and Jo, who was my guide, she was a 22-year-old, and she would climb every step, but she was very sweet. She would stop and she would, every 10 steps, to give me, I think, a break, and she would say, this mountain is named, this peak is named this, it was named after this person. And then when she saw me getting my breath together, okay, it was another 10 steps and another story. So when we reached this old guy, these two were talking together, and I said, after some time, what are you talking about? And she said, well, looking at your condition, he doesn't think you'll reach the top. I was so angry. I said, to hell with this old guy. I took my bag and I reached the top. But when I reached the top, all I could do was lie down for half an hour. I was dead, completely screwed out. But then from there, I got some very, very beautiful pictures of the surrounding areas, including the Wushu Training Center, which was built around 1986 or so by the Chinese government. Unfortunately, I must apologize. The slides and the photographs and the documents that I have are all due to some mishap, locked up in a house where I couldn't get into. So you'll have to rely on the maps I sneaked out from the Chinese and the Indian tourist office, and I'll put up some drawings. I'm not very good at art. I'm good at photography, but it'll give you an idea what it is all about. When I reached this cave, which is about 100 feet from the top of that particular mountain, it is incredible. You stand there. This was in 89. Now the place is, I guess, booming. In 89, and the place is desolate. There is nothing. There's zero, zilch in all four directions. And to think at that time, this monk sat there and meditated and lived there for 9 years. Food obviously came to him from the monks at the Shaolin temple. So he didn't live for 9 years, starving himself or living on love and fresh air. But he got the food from the monks and he did exercises, etc. Then he found he was teaching a bifurcation of Mahayana Buddhism. Hinayana Buddhism, which is lesser vehicle Buddhism, already existed in China from 5 centuries before Christ. It had been traveling around. This guy went there in the 5th century AD and he propagated Mahayana Buddhism, and people, according to records, loved Mahayana Buddhism better because Hinayana Buddhism says you seek salvation but only for yourself. Mahayana Buddhism says you seek salvation not only for yourself but take others along with you. Try to save others. So people got more interested in it. It was new also. And so things started getting more channeled towards his sort of Buddhism. Then when he went up into this cave 1 year, 2 years, and he stayed there and he didn't come down, then people started saying, this is a holy man, and he was called, okay, let me see. The young lady at the back there, please stand up. Yeah, we'll make you a model for 1 minute. Okay, if you look at her eyes, Chinese, you see the eyes are slanted sidewards, which is a form of beauty where the Chinese are concerned. Now you can sit down. But when an Indian like me, like Bodhidharma, landed there, our eyes, the round eyes, were something unique for the Chinese. So they called him a wild-eyed barbarian. That was what he was termed first. And then, you analyze this and you say, okay, why wild-eyed? And then for them, our eyes are completely round, and it was like, you're staring at something after having got a kind of a fright. But he was very good in the senses. He stayed there, he lived there for 9 years. And then in teaching these monks at the Shaolin temple, and they used to go up there regularly, Mahayana Buddhism, which entails many, many hours of meditation, he found that the circulatory system was getting tied up. And so he started teaching them different types of yogic exercises and different types of the martial art systems which came from India with him. Having been a prince in his own place, this guy would have definitely been taught all these martial arts and everything else. The Chinese took that and adapted it to their own systems. It's not to say the Chinese didn't have the martial arts. They had different types of martial arts all over China. But if I say the martial arts and yoga and everything else, much as people try to say it came from religion, it came from Hinduism, it came from here and there, I believe it came from nature. Man watching nature learned these various things. And if you look at, I had 2 cats, the love of my life. I think I love them better than my wife because ultimately she left me. But if you notice these 2 cats, even when they are fighting or when they are playing, or animals, you'll always find one will put out the hand and the other will wrap it away. And it's the same thing in karate. The left hand comes out, the right hand taps it away from the body or blocks it, and the counter comes. And so my very firm conviction is they human beings studied this and adapted it to themselves. And then, of course, there were some with an ego who decided that I devised this form of martial arts. No, it came from nature. If anybody tells me that he devised it, he is nothing else but a bald-faced liar. I think I'm watching in my friend's place MSNBC too much. I'm becoming like Keith Olbermann, who's very, very rough on the politicians. So for me to say it was, Hinduism is there. Everything related to Hinduism was chronicled in the Shastras, as part of the Shastras. So even though it was chronicled there, that doesn't mean it came from the Hindu gods. It didn't. Somebody just didn't get up and, okay, I have devised the martial arts and this god gave it to me. No. It doesn't. It evolved over a period of time. Like the medicinal systems, etc., evolved over a period of time. And the medicinal system, coming back to it, it's still evolving because new diseases are coming up all the time. But where Bodhidharma was concerned, he taught them not only that but the martial arts. And even today in Shaolin Temple, there is a staff, a 6-span staff. We have what you call as wooden weapon systems, metal weapon systems, an attack on the nervous system, which ultimately leads into the cure aspect of Ayurveda, which is very close to acupuncture. Because the marma points which I will attack in Kalaripayat are the same points that are where acupuncture, except that in acupuncture they penetrate the body with a needle to unblock the block that is there. While in Ayurveda the same point is used with appropriate oils to massage it in a particular way, which removes the block. Now, where Bodhidharma is concerned, he also taught them the martial arts because when these monks went from place to place preaching Buddhism, they were attacked either by highway robbers who didn't believe in Buddhism and whatnot, or by animals. So they learned to defend themselves against this. The various animal poses, like in India, in Kalaripayat, we have the peacock pose, which the Chinese changed to the crane pose. And we have the snake pose, which is also the very same as they are. And so there is a very close similarity. Again, I will, much as they, Wushu masters have accepted in the Wushu training center that it came from India, I will still not say, okay, it came from India or not, because I want you all to leave as my friends, not as, somebody who will spit on my face as you leave the door. The situation there was, it was very good in the sense is, they learned these martial arts, and the Shaolin temple, which I have objected against as usual, is not actually a temple. We have the idea of a temple as one building going up and then growing sidewards with all arms attached to the main temple. The Shaolin temple is what I would call a Shaolin monastery. It's 7 layers of buildings, 7 different buildings. And the 4th building is totally dedicated to Bodhidharma. And we think we are what you call as capitalists. I think the Chinese will be able to teach us capitalism very quick, because it was very funny. I remember there was an old scroll inside this temple, beautiful scroll, and you're not supposed to photograph it. But being kind of a semi-nasty journalist, I put my camera on motor drive, held it at the side and fired a shot. And it went off, and the monk who sits there chanting 24 hours, they do it by rotation, saw the flash go off, and he kind of semi-woke up, and he saw me with the camera and he frowned. So before he could say a word, I went quickly to the box for the money and I put 5 yuan in it. But he was still very firm. He came and he held me gently by the arm. He smiled. He took me to the door, took me to the side of the temple and go. Go back, go do your photography somewhere else. Then we went to another place in Shaolin Temple, and there are two types of monks. There are the fighting monks and the praying monks. And we found these two guys on a tree. So I asked my guide, I said, why are they there? So she asked them, and they said, it's a little cooler up here than on ground level. They were hardly 20 feet from us. So we are up there. So we asked them who they are. They said they are the fighting monks. So I said, can they come down and give us a few poses? Capitalism. So again the guy said, okay, we'll come down. How much are you going to pay us? So hey, it's part of life. So I said, oh, how much do they want? And they named a figure which was about $3 American. So I said, fine. So they came down, they gave me a couple of poses, and I took some photographs. Then he had a brighter idea. He says, suppose we go and put on our fighting robes, would you pay us some more? So I said, no problem. That kind of thing you cannot say no to. So the guy is trying to make a few bucks. And now I noticed that even in Africa and other parts of India and other parts of the world, you point a camera at somebody, they ask for money. Because they are realizing now you're taking their photographs, coming here and selling it to some magazine and making money out of it. Why should you only do that? Let them get a share, which I totally agree with. Even the poorest villager in India now, you point a camera, they want some money. And it is so little you don't mind giving, because $1 a day there is quite a bit of money for them. So why not give it to them for us? I just paid, I think, $1.50 for a hot dog before I got in here. So like that, they kind of look after themselves. And where Bodhidharma was concerned, there are many myths and riddles. He was finally buried there in the mountain, which he seemed to have loved. And there is even a myth about him that he was actually returning to India. And they say that he was met by another monk who met him, and he saw him only with one sandal on his feet. And so they wished each other goodbye, and the monk went. And then when he came back to the Shaolin area, people said, he told them that I saw this monk, and they said, no, he died. And he said, no, I saw him with this one sandal on his foot. He was on his way back to India. And finally, a lot of bickering took place. But then the myth is that when they went back and dug up the grave, they found only one sandal in the grave, saying the other sandal. So there are lots of stories about this. And so it's a situation where in Chinese records, he absolutely existed. Even today, donkey's years after he passed away, they still have a temple revering him. They still have weapons named after him. There are stories and there are facts, and you've got to differentiate between the two. But there is no doubting the fact that he did exist. And that's why I get upset when there are American scholars in Buddhism who even today will turn around and say, no, he was a myth. And I say, how do you base your fact on? There is a priest, a Jesuit priest, Father Daumelin, who actually wrote 2 books about it, saying in this book it says this here, and this book it says that here. And so there's got to be the truth that he didn't exist. And my question is, just because one author made a mistake in the date and another author mentioned another date, doesn't mean he didn't exist. Now it's coming from 2 different sources. The dates may be wrong, but both mention him. And in one of the books, there's actually an eyewitness account of a monk who had actually seen him at the White Horse Temple in Loyang. And Bodhidharma was supposed to have gone there, and he appreciated the skyline of the White Horse Temple. Now, to give you an idea of how the Shaolin Temple is, basically, this is where the Shaolin Temple is. I told you my drawing is not very good. There are 7 layers of buildings out here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 7. Here you have the Wushu Training Center. It's a huge affair. I had a 28mm lens, yet when I was standing from here, I couldn't get the whole Wushu Training Center into the lens. Then from here you go up here and you start climbing. And in this area you have what you call is the Palace of Pagodas. That is where monks, female and male, are buried in the Palace of Pagodas. And the even number, the pagodas are by layers, and the even numbers of layers means the more senior a monk is, and it's a male monk. The uneven numbers are for female monks. Don't ask me why they did that. When we were going up into this area, we on ground level close by here is a monastery for the nuns. So you start climbing here and you go up this mountain, and it's quite big, and if this is the peak, they have a pagoda for Bodhidharma here, and around here is the cave where he meditated. But as we were going up, Joe is very mischievous, my Chinese guide, and I like the way she said, have you noticed between two high peaks where there are men's monasteries, there is always a woman monastery? And she said it with a very mischievous smile on her face, meaning, like the Catholic Church, there also hanky-panky goes on. So, but the way she said it, you can see the difference between a religious person who would never say such a thing and a lay person who kind of realizing I'm an American and that would amuse me, said this is what happened. So basically but from here the peak, I got a beautiful clear shot of the Wushu Training Center, the complete center. I was using a 300 millimeter and I was using no tripod, just a hand, but I got a clean shot of the whole Wushu Training Center and it looked great. No doubt we had to take out a little bit of haze because from here to there is about 2 miles as the crow flies. But only because I was up there I was able to get that. In any other place I would not be able to get that. Now that I have been speaking a lot and I'm getting old, and now I realize I'm old, I'm getting a little tired. Any questions? Go right ahead.
It is undeniable the fact that Buddhism was imported from India to China
Right.
many centuries ago, and it definitely have transformed the Chinese culture as well as the Chinese custom, and now it became actually one of the three top religions in China, along with Taoism and Confucianism. What I want to know is how is Buddhism in India right now?
Okay. Buddhism in both India, Buddhism started in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh, the northern state, is here, and that is where Sarnath Buddha was born. Buddha preached his first sermon and Buddha died in that state. And because it is Uttar Pradesh here, it went across Tibet and into China area. Okay. The other portion is slowly, by the 5th century, Buddhism spread out all over India. And I come from this state and I'm kind of proud of it, because from here Bodhidharma is supposed to have been born and brought up, and from there he went to China. Now from here there is a place here called Mahabalipuram which has a very big seaport even in the old days, and he would have most probably gone via the seaport from here, touching Sri Lanka I think, and then on to Thailand and other places before he reached China. Okay. Now we know in China he reached in this area Guangzhou, and like I said, I just want to go back now to photograph that house and to photograph the White House Temple also before I do my book. But what happens is there was a lot of trade with this state is Kerala, this green thing here, and even today in a place called Cochin in Kerala, they have as a museum piece old fishing nets of Chinese fishing nets, which are just kept there for display and not that they use them, etc. So there was a lot of trade. Even the acrobatics which the acrobats do in the circuses, I think either came from India or from China. I'm being diplomatic. So we do not know again where it came from. But you see a lot of these, the Chinese are very good at acrobatics and blah, blah, blah. And because they are young looking, there was a racket recently at the Olympics that they were underage. But Chinese and Asian women, I'm jealous of them also. They look always much younger than what they are. And I remember when I went to photograph the king cobras in Thailand recently at Khon Kaen University, we met some professors, and one young girl or woman or whatever, about that high, came up to me and said, I'm Professor so-and-so. So I nearly fell backwards. This looked like she should have been in high school. And I said, have you ever thought of doing some research as to why Asian women look much younger than what they are? And I like the way she told me, without batting an eyelid, she just said, no, we don't look younger than what we are. American women look older than what they are. So I said, keep your mouth shut when you come to America. You open your mouth and say that, you'll get killed out here. Don't come here and open your mouth. But the thing is, they look much younger, and so you'll find there was a young girl in Thailand. She was hardly that small, hardly about 80 pounds. And she used to carry these huge trays with about 10 dishes on that, for service to the guests. So they are brought up small. Now, I hear that in the southern part of China, women or men also are smaller than the northern part, where they are taller. And that's why they use bigger chopsticks in the northern part and smaller chopsticks in the southern part. This lady is smiling, so I do not know whether it's true or not. But, there are so many stories and so many things that are interesting that you sit down and you think, wherever we came from, China, India, Iceland, blah, 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 I didn't want to be born in, most probably now, I didn't want to be born in India. You may not have wanted to have been born in China, but that's where we were born. But that doesn't make you superior to anybody else. Everybody is equal, including, and I tell these Americans, see where your arrogance has got you now. Now you're in trouble up to here financially and otherwise, and now starting to tell lies left, right and center, especially in this new voting situation. And I'm wondering what the foreigners are sitting and doing, thinking, if they can lie against each other so much, where do we foreigners stand a chance when they want something? They're going to lie outright and do everything so long as it suits their purpose. But coming back to Bodhidharma, Bodhidharma believed that it has, to answer your question, when it left India, it was Mahayana Buddhism. There was Hinayana and Mahayana. Now there are two other major parts of Buddhism called Vajrayana Buddhism, which is basically Tibetan, and Theravada Buddhism, which is Sri Lankan. Sri Lankans are pure vegetarians. The Tibetans eat meat. They have very little choice because in that altitude there is very little else that raw vegetable that can grow. So the Hinayana and the Mahayana Buddhism have big fights. Not Hinayana, the Theravada and the Vajrayana Buddhists, the Sri Lankan and Tibetans have big fights. That the Sri Lankans say whatever it is, you should be vegetarian. So one Tibetan Buddhist got upset with these guys and said, okay, if that is the situation, you come and stay with us 6 months, and then if you're still a vegetarian, we'll all become vegetarian. And then unfortunately he took up the challenge, he went, and in 3 months he died. Whether he died due to natural causes or whether he missed his vegetable or whatever, the guy passed away. So there is these kind of things that take place all the time. But there are different types of Buddhism. Like a friend of mine from the Wall Street Journal, a pure meat and potatoes man, American, went to the Canton market and he came back a pure vegetarian. He won't even touch milk. So he said, what the hell happened to you? And he said, oh, they are very proud of their market. Anything that moves, they will sell it. And one thing that he saw which really put him off was a whole pile of happy puppy dogs jumping about in a cage. And one customer said, I want that dog. And the guy just took the dog and smashed his head on a rock next to him, wrapped it up in a piece of paper and gave it to the customer, which is quite normal in China. But it put him off completely, because here we love dogs, we pamper them, we buy them coats for $300, which I've never bought for myself. So here it is a whole different ball game. So it depends upon how each person looks at different things. Like right in the heart of Beijing, there is what they call is their Fifth Avenue Wangfangjing Road, and right in the middle of Wangfangjing Road is a snake restaurant. And you go to that snake restaurant and on either side of the door here we have in the fish restaurants live fish swimming around. There you have live snakes crawling over one another. You appoint anyone, he will take it out, he will skin it, clean it, cook it and all that, and he'll bring it. So when we went there, it was kind of sleepy time for him, so they had closed and they were sleeping, but $20 goes a long way in China, in Beijing even. So we gave him $20 and then finally he pulls out a snake and then he puts his foot on the tail and then he holds the head and he snips off the head. And that's when you feel sorry for the snake. The head comes jumping out. Then he holds it and he drains the blood, which just is about so much in a 6-foot snake. And then he cut down the side and he took out 2 little black balls and he puts it in a glass and he pours rice wine into it. Now rice wine is yellow. And then he put 2 chopsticks and he broke up these black balls and he stirred the whole thing. And he found all this black stuff swirling in this rice wine. And then he said something to my guide. I was changing lenses thinking, if I use a flash, it's going to bounce off the glass. So I changed the lens. Then my guide said, no, he wants you to drink that. So I said, oh God, what is that? Then he turned around and said, don't laugh. He says, that is the gallbladder of the snake. And he was doing me an honor because the gallbladder is supposed to be good for the eyes. So the cook thought I was a photographer and I needed good eyes. So he was giving me the gallbladder of the snake. But when he was cooking it, we photographed it, and you won't believe after he mixed the snake bones with chicken bones and added ingredients. And I'm 63, like I said before, I've never tasted such a delicious soup. Incredible soup. The meat was okay, because we were watching it, the taste felt slightly different. Otherwise, I'd have confused it with chicken and mixed vegetable. But the soup was incredible, and I'm just dying to get back to have another one of those cups of soup. But these are things which is very normal for them, which is abnormal for us. Like in Korea, you go and they are really, if they feel you're an honored guest, they will make you puppy dog for dinner. And Koreans. So basically each person has, in India when I left, now of course things are different. When a guest came for lunch, it was chicken. Or for dinner, it was chicken. Fish was also there. But here now, when I first came to America in 82, I felt like I was a king. Every nook and corner had Kentucky Fried Chicken and this chicken and that chicken, and it was chicken all the time. And one day I got fed up and I said, okay, to heck with this, I want some beef, and I went and had a steak. But when the bill came, I nearly had a heart attack. Because here at that time, beef steak was supposed to be the costly thing. So each country has its own, pros and cons, etc., etc. Now, where Bodhidharma is concerned, next year I am from the Asian Arts and Cultural Council. We are planning a trip to go from basically a place called Kanchipuram in South India. Now basically this is the state. It's like a province in China. It's called Tamil Nadu. That means the land of the Tamils. This is a bigger intensive map of Tamil Nadu. Around here there is a place called Kanchipuram, which is a very, very sacred place for the Hindus. Originally Buddhism, when it started, caught on very fast, because first the Buddha was against the caste system of the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Sudras and Vaishyas. So the undertrodden were taking on more into Buddhism, because they felt in Buddhism there was equality. And then Buddha, when he preached, most of the time he preached in Pali, which is the common language of the people, not in Sanskrit, which was the sophisticated language. In the time of Bodhidharma's father, I could deduce this Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Calcutta, Mysore and Andhra Pradesh. These four states were all one area, one complete area. So I have been trying to get friends of mine from historical records to drop into this area to find out if there was any chieftain. I'm not even saying king, because they were all little places, and each place that had about 500 people, there was a king. Whether there was a king who had 3 sons, and I'm finding it virtually impossible to get. His name, when he was first, before he was ordained, was Bodhidharma. And he had 2 elder brothers, and then when he became ordained by this monk Prajnatara, he became Bodhidharma. And Prajnatara had said that after a few years he should go to China to propagate Buddhism there. So my connection is, in 2 or 3 of the historical records of China, it is said that he took about 3 years to travel from India to China. And I said, even with sails and men rowing, it doesn't take you 3 years. Then again, the deduction comes is, did it touch Sri Lanka? In my opinion, it would have, to get resupplied. Then did it touch Thailand? Did it touch Vietnam, etc., where there is strong Buddhist influences before it landed in China? If what my deductions are correct, then it would have taken him 3 years to get there. There is another myth that says that when he landed in China, he was 150 years old, which even though there are people who have lived that long, but I don't think it was true in his case, because there is a Swamiji here who's very fiery. He still teaches yoga at the temple in Flushing, and he's, from what we can authenticate, is about 114 years old. He's a bit slow, but once he gets a hold of who you are, he'll start shouting and screaming, and that's not a man you talk back to. That is too old. Like, I met him after I had my surgery of about 8 years, and I met him at the temple, and I knelt before him and put my hand on his knee, and I said, Swamiji, do you remember me? He looked at me, and you could see his brain whirring. He was trying to think, where the hell did I see this guy? But he remembered he had seen me somewhere. And then I said, it's Arana, the journalist. "Oh, how are you?" Then he patted me on the back, and then suddenly he forgot all that and he started screaming at me in front of everybody. "How have you put on so much of weight? You have become very fat, this, that." And I'm trying to say, slither into my clothes, and this guy is throwing half a dozen fits. But then what do you say to him? He's the grand old man of yoga. He was actually born deformed. When he was born, 114 more years maybe, his parents threw him into a fire because they wanted to kill him. At that time, a Swamiji walking past saw the child, took the child out of the fire, and then brought him up as a yogi. So he's learned yoga right from the time he's young itself. And he does some of these, crazy feats of yoga, which we call crazy, which is used for them quite normally, etc. You had another question?
No, just a small comment. I just want to say that Buddhism is definitely one of the most precious gifts that we receive from India and Indian people. For that, I just want to say thank you for you guys.
Well, I had nothing to do with it, but I'll accept the thanks. No, but the situation is, like, I remember one Chinese friend of mine telling me, I'll go one step backwards. I was flying from London to Delhi, and I was just dying to get into Delhi and break into a sweat because I left London in November and it was bitterly cold. In a place called Clacton-on-Sea, I came out one night and I couldn't feel my ears. And I said, boy, it's time to go back. So we came back, and in the flight was a Britisher, and we kept teasing him, the whole way, like, you stole our peacock throne, you stole this, you took tea from India and all that sort of thing. And he kind of kept quiet till we reached Delhi, and just before we reached Delhi, he says, well, don't think we did that for fun, understand? We taught you guys English. And a Chinese friend recently teasing me, he says, you all gave us religion, but we gave you Chinese food. And all over India you have a lot of places where Chinese food is everywhere, in every part of the world. And so it's not to say we gave you religion, because there was again a lot of inter-exchange there was a lot of travelers who came from China to India, saw Buddhism, invited Buddhist monks over, etc. You all had your own form of religion called Confucianism and Taoism, etc., etc. And here there is a gentleman, if you want to give me your email addresses and I'll send you his connecting email. He organizes functions on interreligious faiths. He doesn't believe there are different religions. He says all of us believe in a God and we should all work together. He is the 74th in lineage from Confucius, here located in New York in Queens. And a grand old man. He's a good friend. We go out and gobble Indian food together, because I believe Indian food or whatever food always brings people together. So if you come to India, the first thing is, if you meet somebody there, the first thing they'll tell you is come home for food. And it's insulting if you say no. And even if you go by accident during mealtime, automatically you have to sit down and eat something. While here in America it's considered suspicious, especially if I invite a young lady, I say come home to eat. Forget it, there is, like, what is he going to do after that? Why does he want me to come for food? So it's different ways of accepting different things. But I don't think we gave you all religion. You all had your own forms of religion before. Even though I thank you for thanking me, I will pass it on wherever I go in future. But it's a question where now Mahayana Buddhism went to China and became Chan Buddhism. And then in the 12th century it went via Korea into Japan and it became Zen Buddhism. And even now Zen Buddhism, it has become a bifurcation of Zen Buddhism. Most of it in India and China has died out, because the Hindus don't, in my opinion, want Buddhism to crop up again. Though the Japanese are spending tons of money in Nalanda University and other Buddhist places to rebuild that. The government is accepting it because, one, it is good for tourism and it pulls in money, because you'll get more Buddhists coming out there. But when I went into Kanchipuram, and there are 3 huge temples about 20 miles outside from Kanchipuram, because it's a desolate place again, it's just lowland. And from there with the zoom lens we could get these 3 temple tops sprouting up into the air. But when we reached the village, and they could see by the dress, and we had come in a car and we were carrying cameras and all that, and we tried to find out which of those 3 Hindu temples had been a Buddhist temple before. People got very upset. And we had to get into the car and very diplomatically, delicately, but in a quick way, leave the area. I think because, word of mouth spreads things very quickly. See, foreigners are coming, foreigners are doing this thing, that thing, and then they'll uproot the car and break our cameras and all that. Because there people get excited very quickly. So we left the area. They say that Brahmanism was there and the Brahmins felt that their power was losing, so ultimately they reconverted some of these Buddhist temples to Hindu temples, consecrated them back into Hindu temples. And so even now they don't want Buddhism to crop up again, except as a tourist thing. That's fine, it's going to go on. But as a religion coming up again, they don't want it, they don't like it. I was brought up, like I said, Catholic. I've studied Islam, I studied Hinduism, etc. I feel I like Buddhism the easiest, the most, the nicest, because for one simple reason is it is not confrontational. Christian, the religion, Hindu religion, Islam, etc. have all had wars and fights and all sorts of things going on. You don't find that in Buddhism. And I am wondering, how many Christians are there here before you all start throwing stones or throw a stick at me or something? Okay, two of them. Okay, I can handle you all. Okay, what I feel is, and if you study these religions, you'll find it very funny again, like in cultures, religions also have a lot of similarity. Buddha went off into the desert and fasted for a number of days, during which time he was also tempted by the devil. Christianity also says the same thing, which came 5 centuries later, that before Jesus went during the period of Lent, he went and fasted for 40 days, and during that time also he was tempted by the devil. These similarities now make me ask the question, which can make many people quite angry, but remember, have a cold drink before you throw something at me. Which religion followed religion, or who was copying whom from where? And these are questions we can only ask ourselves to get at the truth. I'm not trying to say Christianity is better or Christianity is worse, or Buddhism is better, Buddhism is worse. In my opinion, from what I've studied, Buddhism seems to be the calmest religion. Jainism is there, and Jainism is even more calm. They'll drive you quite crazy, because even if an ant crawls on him and bites him, he will not kill the ant, he will push it away gently. Because for them, life is life. Life is very important. And even in the diets, they will not take any roots that are grown below ground, etc. No onions to excite them, etc. So each religion has its own good and bad points, and you have to take what you think is the best for you to adapt, and then adapt it to yourself. So I know the school where I studied, where I, at the age of 14, almost became a priest. I studied in a Catholic school. And my father got into a temper with the principal because I was the only son, so he didn't want me to be a priest. He wanted me to have sons and children and whatever. But see where I have come after 63 years of life, and if I live a few years longer, most probably I'll change all over again to something else. So it all depends upon how much you study, how much you are inquisitive, without becoming fanatical. I don't think it is right for anyone, Islam or Christians or whatever, to say we are the only religion, we are the only God, etc., etc. Because there is too much in the world now. To give you an idea, I was in charge of the Theosophical Society in Madras in India for security. And on the northern border, which bordered the sea, there were a lot of casuarina trees. And I said, let's clear about 20 feet inside the fence of these casuarina trees, so that the security guys will have good visual situation to look at. And it was very funny, there was an uproar literal from the older generation of Theosophists. And I said, what happened? And one of the older guys came to me and said, you idiot, do you know that each tree has some spirits living in it? And I looked at him and I said, now has this guy been on spirits, or what is he talking about? And he says, no, there are spirits living on trees, and before you cut down a tree, you have to do a special puja or religious ceremony to let the spirits know the tree is going to be cut, and so they can go and find another place. Reminds me of the situation I am in now. I'm in transit, I'm searching for a room for myself. So the spirits were there. So when I went home in the evening, there was an older gentleman next to me, very old, very learned. And I said, uncle, can you believe this nonsense? They say there are spirits in trees. And he told me, don't think because what your mind, which is so small, understands, that it can understand the whole world. So there is a lot of things that are still have to be explained, still have to be understood before we can really understand it. And then he said, take your Bible. If you go through the Bible, how many times is the word spirit mentioned in the Bible? So there are spirits. So after that I became kind of scared of the bogeyman. And now Halloween, I guess I will stay inside my house and behave myself. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, ma'am. Ladies first.
You made a trip to Shaolin Monastery.
Right.
And you obviously had a special interest in. His name in Chinese is Damo.
Damo, right. And in Japan, actually, where Zen Buddhism is concerned, he is called Daruma.
Did you hear about his special contribution to Buddhism as well as to martial art in that monastery?
Right. Now, basically, he taught them Chan Buddhism, like I said initially. And in teaching them Chan Buddhism and a lot of meditative practices, he found that they were tying up their circulatory systems, because sitting for hours in that meditative pose, during which time he was lecturing about Mahayana Buddhism. And since you're taking notes, he concentrated a lot, and that again brings me to the idea that I'm sure he touched Sri Lanka, because his theory was based on the Lankavatara Sutra. Like you have the Heart Sutra and other sutras, his speciality was the Lankavatara Sutra. He had 4 disciples, amongst one which was a woman. And when he handed the bowl and the robe on, passing the hierarchy on to the next monk, Hyuki, he also gave him a copy of the Lankavatara Sutra. So he taught them religion and he taught them the martial arts. The martial arts came second. It is religion which came first, because that is what he went to China for. So in the book also I divided into 2 kind of parts. One is touching on the religious aspect and one is touching on the martial art aspect.
Right. The religious aspect, you were talking about meditation and blood circulation. What was his new teaching?
Okay, his teaching was what you call a sudden awakening. That means you do long hours of meditation trying to empty the mind, so that when this sudden awakening takes place, all the knowledge comes in one blow rather than in bits and pieces, like the Buddha did. And that's why he went off into this cave. And I would suggest, if you can climb to that mountain, I'm sure you're all more physical fit than I am, to go and stand there and see. There's another place I saw like that in Africa, in Tanzania. We stood on this little hilltop of about 200 feet. Miles in front of us, desolate land, desolate shrubs and rocks and this and that. Not a person had lived there. And in that portion of land, they can't tell you the exact place, about 40 years ago, a lady called Mary Leakey, an anthropologist, whose son is now the animal minister for animals in Kenya, they discovered a 1 3/4 million year old fossil. Richard Leakey. Unbelievable. You stand there and you say, man walked there, how the hell did he manage it? And so there's a lot of you stay on this, you stand near this cave and you look all around and there's nothing but mountains. And Shaolin temple is there, the monasteries, the ladies monasteries there, the wushu training center is there. Now I hear it's a big village and a lot of schools have come up, etc. But then also you stand near this cave and you say, this man must have been a raving lunatic to meditate here for 9 years. But that dedication and that belief gave him the courage and the impetus to go ahead and do it. It was incredible. It's incredible. Even now, you had to go to the bathroom, you had to go with the rocks, you had to wait, depend upon somebody else for your food. The monks would come up. Even now, the monks from the wushu training center across all these mountains, they run up to the Shaolin temple, then run up to that cave and then run downstairs. And they run down on those steps which I've described to you, which is scary. The youngest monk there was about 6 years old, cute little guy, bald-headed and all, with his little kung fu dress. The oldest was about 21. Every day about 20 of those monks would run up and down. And I said, has anyone fallen so far with my heart in my mouth? And they said, no. And I said, why do you do this? They said, because it helps us attain balance. And if somebody falls and hurts himself, believe me, they go to their teacher like we do in India, and we get tied up and we get sutured or whatever. Here, of course, you go searching for a lawyer and sue the master. So there is a difference. Like initially when I wrote this article on Kalaripayattu for Inside Kung Fu magazine in 1984, many letters came in saying start a school. And I really wanted to start a school because there was an Indian who wanted to donate the ground to us. And the Kalari has to be built to certain specifications 7 feet below ground level. And then thatch roof, there's certain specifications for it. And I wanted to do that till somebody asked me, do you have insurance? And I say, yeah, I have insurance, I have life insurance. And they said, no, your school has got to get insurance. So I said, for what? He said, if somebody gets hurt, he'll really sue you. I said, forget it. I haven't come here to be sued by somebody. I don't want to get into fights. So I'll write about it, I'll lecture about it, which I do.
And his branch of martial art, did it have any close connection to the philosophy of the branch of Buddhism that he brought there?
No, I think it came out of Kalaripayattu, because in the murals on the walls that they are preserved very well, you see some of the movements, and even the movements in Wushu are something very much like Kalari movements. And even like we have wooden weapons, we have metal weapons, etc., and then we'll have locks and grips, which again went off into Kung Fu and other functionings, which lays stress on the body's human system. Now you have the circulatory system, the muscular system, the nervous system, etc., etc. And it's the same thing here, like I said, very close to Marma points being very close to acupuncture points. And these are, it's very technical because even in yoga they say, why should we do it early in the morning? How many of you all have cars here? How many of you all drive cars? Only one? He's the courageous one because he has to find a parking space for his car. But if you shut off the engine of your car and you put your hand on the car, on the bonnet, and you try to listen to the car, you will find that there is very little movement except the movement of other cars on the road. But once you start your car, you find a slight juddering. That is the vibration coming out of the engine of the car. After some time of yogic and meditative exercises, you can put your hand on various parts of your body and you can find the vibrations of your body, which creates what you call is the aura. The Tibetan monks read the aura due to very high level meditative and yogic exercises, and they will be able to tell you basically what is the medical problem with you. We do it by a method of feel. We run the hand over the body and feel the aura, and we can tell you where there is a problem. Of course, in my heart area, nothing is moving, so you won't find any vibration. But it's a situation where the vibrations of the body, we try to assimilate it again with yoga, with the vibrations of the earth. Now you're going to say, what do you mean by vibrations of the earth? The earth revolves. Tide comes in and tide goes out. 4:30 to about 5:30 in the morning, the tide is leaving. The vibrations change. And that's why we do certain specific yoga exercise in the morning to adapt ourselves to the changing vibrations of the earth. It's very technical. It takes you years to kind of really even understand it. My students, there are some who have been with me 3 or 4 years, and they say, we are fed up of the Surya Namaskar, when do we go on to the next one? I take them first to the Surya Namaskar and then various other asanas. And then when I teach them the Surya Namaskar, I make it very specific that unless the positioning in each asana is correct, I will not take you on to the next one. It's got to be correct for you to get the benefit of it. Now they are starting to understand. The very first movement of the Surya Namaskar, the one, is, believe it or not, after some time when you bring this, you'll feel the vibrations of each hand towards each other. And when you do this, you're not losing energy or the prana or the life force. Even when you sit in the meditative position, there is the right leg over the left thigh, the left ankle coming over the right thigh. Why? If you really correctly look at that positioning, you will find again the energy levels are going within the circulatory system of the body. You're not losing energy. I'm releasing a blow, I'm losing energy. It's coming out of here. It got to go towards each other. It's safeguarded inside the body. It's difficult to understand for those who have not studied it before. I've tried to explain it. Some of my students are starting to understand it after about 3 years. Because in about 3 years they are realizing now they are touching the very outer fringes of yoga. And people ask me also, what about meditation? Meditation comes later. Meditation is not 20 people sitting in a room all chanting Om and then coming out and stabbing each other in the back. That is not meditation. Meditation calms the mind. Meditation comes first. First level we teach is awareness. We are all sitting here. We drank Coke. We have drunk tons of water. Have you ever sat down and tried to understand? I put a mouthful of water in my mouth. What does it taste like? That is awareness. If you want to increase your awareness, go to a garden, smell different flowers. You'll get different smells. That is awareness. Then start concentration. Focus your mind on a certain subject and try to clear out the rest of the mind. Very difficult to do. Sounds easy. Okay, we can do it. No, you cannot. You'll always find the mind starting to interfere there, and it will try to destroy your concentration. Once you get past and you have learned concentration, then you go to meditation. By then you have got a control on the mind, some sort of control on the mind. You just cannot. I'm studying yoga. What do you do? What sort of yoga do you do? I don't know. I said, that is crazy. You got to, when you study yoga, know what sort of yoga you are learning. Basically, there are 8 forms of yoga. Today, there are about 2 million forms of yoga, because Jim has a yoga and Sam has a yoga and everybody has a yoga, and there's even yoga for pregnant women. If a woman gets pregnant, I will not touch her, because each one's placenta and each one's stomach area in which the baby grows, from the first day of it being conceived, it's got life. It's not first semester, second semester. That's all a lot of cock and bull. From the time the heart is starting to pump, there is life. And when the baby is, each person is different. You are different from me. I'm different from her, etc. And each person's strength of the baby bag and the placenta and all that is different. So and the Surya Namaskar itself is a series of 12 movements. And the Surya Namaskar, it looks beautiful, it looks graceful when you finish the 12 movements. But the initial stages, you know how tired you feel after those 12 movements? People think it's so easy, I can do it, till they all come gasping for breath after the 12th movement. So basically it is, pregnant women are concerned, we will not touch them. I will come and sit and watch, do what you want, but you're not going to take part in the class, because here you get sued again. So you got to watch it. But basically we do it because we don't, for us the most important thing is when a student comes into your class, for the student to go out of the class in the same position he came in, without being damaged, without being hurt, without anything happening. Because then it is a disgrace to us. Not because somebody is going to sue me, but because it is a disgrace to my teaching abilities, which my master gave me the power of. And when we took our vows in the sense is, the situation came is, even today in New York City, we don't charge a cent for teaching class, yoga. I mean, if I have to take a photograph or write an article about it, I'll take money. But yoga, we cannot. In certain classes, they've gathered up money and given it to me, and I said, no, I cannot take it. I'm sorry, I cannot accept it. But then I said, all right, I thought about it, and I said, all right, if you guys are feeling it so much, and I made a mistake, bring me some fruit. And next class I went off with bags of fruit like a Korean grocer. With tons. Then I had to specify, no, 1 apple or 1 orange, nothing more than that. I just cannot take it. So that is where we are. And that is how we function. And in New York, to find a person not getting money for something he's teaching, they think I'm a little weird. I say, well, whatever your thoughts are, but I cannot accept the money. So that is how we function. And to tell you again, nature, the lineage we come from, my teacher, my first teacher, that is my teachers, I don't know how many generations back, when he died, usually Hinduism, they cremate the remains. In our lineage, they bury them, and he was buried in the Padmasana position, that means the lotus or the meditative position, and a huge mud pot was built around him, and he was placed in that mud pot in the Padmasana position, and then it was filled to the top with ghee. You know what is ghee? Ghee is clarified butter. And then that pot is buried into the earth, and it was buried under certain specific conditions, but facing east, because we believe that the sun is the source of all energy. And for that master, the sun was the source of all his energy and knowledge. When the second teacher died, he was buried again within certain specifications, so many feet in front of the first master, but facing the first master, because for him, the source of knowledge was the first master. So like that, there are very strict things we follow. I enjoy myself. I like girls in mini skirts. like Chinese fried rice and pork and everything else. But basically, I follow certain things which I think are valuable and which are important to me, and I follow through on that. And if people say Buddhism says that you've got to be a vegetarian, that only came later, because if you look at it, Buddha's last meal was either a plate of pork or a plate of beef, a plate of mutton, depending upon who wrote the book, because he was poisoned by that ironmonger. And even when he realized he was dying, he told the ironmonger, when I throw up, take that and bury it so that nobody else is disturbed by it. And where you are concerned, I forgive you. Same thing with Jesus Christ. When they killed him, what did he say? Forgive them, for they know not what they do. So there's a lot of, if you juggle the mind a little, the only advice I can say is don't be fanatical. Everybody has their own beliefs, their own likes, their own dislikes. I like to eat pork, some people don't. I'm staying with a friend of mine who's more or less vegetarian, and he's getting tired of the amount of chicken or meat I cook. But it depends upon each one's likes and dislikes. And so that is where we are. Any other question? Yes, sir. I'm sorry you had to wait a long time.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
You have traveled all these places.
Right.
Did you get any support? Is it through a support by a grant foundation?
No. Absolutely, the money I saved and I went. I used to do reasonably well when I was well. 1998, I had open heart surgery for a quadruple. Immediately after surgery, as they were wheeling me out of the theatre, I had a massive heart attack. I was very lucky that time, because when they used the defibrillators to bring me back, it didn't burst any of the fresh stitches in the heart, because the body jerks. And they put a metal ring in my mitral valve because it was out of balance, didn't shake the valve loose. So I was very lucky that I survived that. Then 2 years later, I lost the left side in a stroke. But I had a very, very efficient, virtually zero. I had a very efficient therapist who was just about 22 years old, but first 10 days I felt like killing it, believe it or not. It's 5 hours of therapy a day, and it can be terribly painful. But once the movements start coming back, you realize they're trying to help you, and then you work with them. And then now they have found bleeding in my aorta, which is the last place where you want to have bleeding, because it is the major artery coming out of the heart. It's pumping upwards. And I only have 2/3 of my heart. But the aorta feeds both the arms and the legs, the major veins there. But one good thing that has come out of it is I have a young Jewish doctor who's the love of my life. He's about 45, very decent. I go to him, it's like going to see a psychiatrist. You come out relieved, relaxed, etc. He's very decent. He's only a cardiologist. And initially he used to mumble and grumble about my yoga, and I used to tell him, no, we studied yoga and you must learn yoga and all. And then recently they did a nuclear medicine test. A nuclear medicine test means I am not allowed to get on the treadmill to do the stress test. Because, if I slip and fall there, I'm going to lose everything. So they make you sit in a very comfortable chair that I'm planning for a long time to steal that chair. It's the most comfortable chair I've sat with anywhere. Beautiful. But I think they want you to be comfortable in it. And they first give you one dosage of medicine. And then they bring the second dosage, which is the nuclear medicine. And it is very scary because they come in a lead shield, wearing lead shields. And the medicine was brought in a lead box. And you say, they are protecting themselves, but they are going to pump that into me. And it is scary. And for about 3 minutes, you feel weird. You feel kind of, completely spaced out. Then you come back and you're going back to normal. But it takes a long time to come back to normal, because for about 1 month, it is still circulating in the blood. And you actually carry a letter, because if you go through any metal detector, it will go off. So you carry that letter to say you have got nuclear atoms flowing all over your body, even through your brain. And you find that difficulty in really adjusting, even thinking properly, etc., etc. But the good thing is, when they did that test, within about a week, they sent a written report to my doctor. But the next day itself, the doctor who was reading that graph called my doctor and said, listen, there is something funny, because there is blood seeping back into the damaged area of the heart. Now that is because of my yoga and meditation. There are certain yogic exercises I can do, certain yogic exercises I cannot do. So my doctor was now more inquisitive about yoga and started asking me 20 different questions. And finally I told him, I said, you come for one of our classes, you'll realize what it is. And yoga has its own benefits. The only sad part is, even the Chinese are very good at it. In 161 universities and colleges in America, there is Chinese medicinal courses. There is not one carrying Ayurveda. And we Indians are very good at not selling ourselves at all. We make that very sad mistake. So no knowledge is transferred. We want that knowledge to be put out. So from my group, we try to lecture about it, talk about it. Even to a group of 2, I will go and talk, because we want to put the knowledge out.